Hi, I'm Kieron Gillen. I'm a comic writer. I do books like The Wicked and Divine and the forthcoming Monsters Future, and relevantly today, Die. Die is a comic which, with me and Stephanie Hands, the two-word sort of pitch is goth Jumanji. It's basically about a group of people who got dragged into a fantasy game as teenagers, and most of them escaped. They're now, as sort of 40-something adults, they're being dragged back. So it's kind of about your adult realities versus these teenage fantasies. The idea for Die first occurred actually 3 years ago, like to the day actually, as in it was San Diego 2016. Me, Jamie McKelvey and Ray Fawkes were like wandering around getting ice creams in the mall, and we just started like joking with each other, and we ended up like riffing on remember the 1980s D&D cartoon, like, which is basically a bunch of kids get dragged into a game. Whatever happened to those kids? As we we make some more jokes. Jamie tells us about what actually really happened in terms of the show's production. We carry on eating ice cream. But it kind of nags at me, like, why is this idea nagging at me? And I get to the end of the evening when I'm having dinner with a load of image people and it sort of clicks, and oh no, this is the book I've got to do. As in, this is a device you can use to look at your sort of like these dreams you had as teenagers and how it turned out. And he used it as a device to explore all these very different things. So that was me, that the heart was this kind of, this character, this device to explore characters in hopefully a mature way. Anyway, alongside that, I have, basically, as a side project, I did an RPG, and it's kind of released now on the internet in the beta form. And this RPG basically makes you be able to do your own version of kind of like Die's first arc. Anyway, I'm here today with the lovely people at the Beat to just walk through like some of the character creation stuff. I take game design very seriously. I used to be a game critic, so I'm very aware I'm a dilettante, but that kind of leaning into that and using the RPG as a device to think about Die. As the whole that's kind of the weird thing. The way I think about the RPG now is different from then. Because for a long period I was a bit worried that like which is the dog and which is the tail. Like, it was times like I was working on the RPG system or in the comic less. But in the end they've sort of merged in one in my head, like Ouroboros, as in at each other's tail, Die itself as a comic is very, very meta. Like the world they're on is like explicitly a living history of the RPG. Like the actual planet's a 20-sided enormous planetoid, and each one of the 20 regions is based upon a certain thing that went into RPGs. So there was this Tolkien region, like it's World War I region basically. So it's a discussion of Tolkien rather than being Tolkien. That's the whole of Die's like that. In some ways, Middle Earth exists because Tolkien wants us to write better fanfic languages. Because languages comes from culture, and if you don't have a world where the language comes from, it doesn't mean anything. So in some ways, the RPG is kind of like that. Scratches that bit for Die for me. For the RPG, the idea was how can we actually do in a short form the first arc, because it starts here and ends here, and the middle bit is essentially allows the players to explore stuff. So like, how can you make this feel like Die? And the game structure's like this, and this is kind of the fun thing. Like, the first thing you do is you don't use these character sheets to start with. You sit down and you work out a social group. And you don't know, there's like, the person running the game asks the players questions. And it's okay, this social group all played an RPG as kids. Or like mostly played an RPG. And it's okay, what were you at school? Why were you playing RPGs? And it's like, oh no, we were like all, a bunch of random geeks is a fine example. No, we were like drama society and this is something we did. Or like we're all in detention. Or like we're in a weird camp our family took us on. And that, so you work out a way they know each other. Then you work out like, okay, who fancied who? Like, who didn't like who? Why did you break their heart? Then you age them up a bit. Okay, now you're all, 22, back from university, or 40, or 70. Let's talk about the rest of your life. And so when they've nailed down the people, the thing is, okay, you're now all getting back together to play a game for some reason. And you work out whatever reason it is. And great, everyone step away from the table. And when you come back, you are in character to the person you just made. So you're sitting around a table just chatting naturally. Then the GM persona, as I call these people, personas, gets out the game and say, oh, this game that these kids were playing back in the 90s, let's do it. So basically you whilst playing the person you've just made up, fills a character sheet. So like you're playing a role-playing game in character. So you sit and do this thing, and then the magical moment happens, and obviously you all move to the fantasy world and you probably become the character. And then the story is, do you get home or not? That's it. The GM actually chooses what character class you have. So the GM listens to what you've described and thinks, okay, which of the 6 character classes, or 5 really in the beta, suits that best? Like the GM in this current beta always gets the master. they get to write the rules, is the thing. That's their main kind of special power, as in they get to cheat. They have like an economy, they can spend these coins to basically literally just cheat. And the other 5 are really for the players. The Neo is sort of a fantasy cyberpunk take. The idea they've basically got these sort of cybernetic enhancements. They're quite often mainly rogues. Dictator, who is, to quote from the sheet, if you don't mind me swearing, they're like bards and everyone's really fucking petrified of bards. The Godbinder, who basically makes deals with gods, like a demonologist, cleric, really is the kind of the vibe, but it's much more like conversational with gods. The Emotion Knight is the generalised term, and the Emotion Knight is basically, they feel an emotion and they turn into power. And the Fool is basically about messing around. The Fool, basically, as long as they're being suitably careless, they get like all manner of stuff protecting them, but they've got to act careless, otherwise, you know. And they're deliberately designed to be a class which is a little easier to play. Oh, and that's it. Basically, they're the 6 classes, so that's quite fun. As opposed to like a lot of RPGs which uses one character sheet, part of like the design for DICE, I wanted to make each of the characters feel very different to each other, whilst having sort of like some really standard basic core rules. Each of the characters have their own kind of bit of magic. In other words, all the characters are a little bit mysterious to each other, and they do stuff which no one else can, and they do it in a slightly different way. You write your real name at the top. Let's call my person Violet. Let's make Violet this writer. And the first thing I end up doing is actually a little bit of text. And the text would be, you don't believe in gods. I mean, they exist, obviously. You owe the fire god for that time they burned that fortress, and you've got that favour from the god of the wild when you saved her rainforest, but believe? That's a strong word. Really, nah, you don't believe in gods. You believe in tools. Useful tools. The Godbinder is a D&D cleric as demonologist. So that's, you know, everyone will read that and gives you a kind of like, oh right, I get the high concept of this character. There's a bit beneath saying, don't read this aloud, where it's like, specifically it says, you can make choices either in character, like whatever the person you've made it with it, or like what you, the player, wants to do, or both. So I explicitly write that on the sheet, in this kind of like, be aware of like, cause what you can do. The other thing we do on the first column is, the entire core game rules in this box in the bottom left. The game is a dice pool based system, so you throw a bunch of d6. Depending, if you're very good at something, you throw more d6 and less. 4 plus is success, a 6 does something special as well. And the number of successes you get equals your thing. So to hit someone in combat, you've got to roll your attack dice pool, and if successes equal their defense, you hit them. It's like, you know, really kind of robust. Anyway, stats. I use the classic D&D stats because the meta nonsense. It's like, you know, I could have chosen different names, but I think if doing an RPG about RPGs, leaning into the core D&D-ness was important. So strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. The basic equipment, there's 3 options here, which depends what you are, like a holy warrior, holy man, which I need to ungender, and not holy at all. And that's kind of the big old, like heavily armoured kind of like look, the kind of much more like ascetic kind of vibe, or John Constantine, basically. I think I'm going to go for this one, which means I have a quarterstaff and a sort of robes or loincloths, but also, you know, that gives you a bit of the vibe. Next section is your look, which is very heavily influenced by the Powered by the Apocalypse. So you get a variety of styles. So like heavy metal, holy crusader, likely looking for trouble. Beatific holy person, looking for peace, probably. Wild tattoos, frenzied eyes, likely looking for drugs. Urban straight magician, likely for the gold in your pocket, or your own idea. Now I'm going to select the wild tattoos and frenzied eyes one. It's quite fun. And I'm going to actually write a little bit like raven tattoos. You know, just make it a bit more specific. This sheet is kind of like the same for almost everybody. Like you have your own options, but this kind of is pretty solid. It's the second sheet where you get the real kind of like meat of the class. In the case of the Godbinder, your real choice is, okay, who are your gods? So like there's 3 gods listed, the fire god, the god of light, and the god of the wild. Depending which god you kind of choose, you know, you get some free miracles, and your lesser miracles or minor miracles, as I've written here, are like your kind of the cantrips in D&D. You get to do these basically as much as you like. I'm going to go the god of excess, the god of one more drink at 3 AM on a school night, and it's when we actually get into the game and you probably become this character, the GM will play the god you've created. You know, and the way I do it is like I actually stand up and go and stand behind people and speak in their ear in character. So there's a real set of rules and it works as a basic like adventure system, but at the same time you've got these kind of really creative parts. I mean, like the Emotion Knight's a good example that as well as actually being able to fight people, you know, there's lots of like usual sort of swords. As they feel their emotions, they turn that into like attacks and whatever. So that's the thing about the game. There's bits of it which are absolutely quite crunchy, and there's bits that kind of like lean into the magic. And the game in some ways is like a dialogue between all those things. Anyway, I've actually over-explained it because frankly, you know, the second I drew those lines on and chose the god, we were basically in and ready to play. Anyway, as I said, Die. I said the beta is available to download now. Hopefully I'll do another, like, an addition, like a few more tweaks when the comic comes back in August. The comic is coming back in August, issue 6. Stephanie's presently at work on issue 9. Like, the second arc's called Split the Party, which is, we're having a lot of fun with that. And of course I've been, generously hosted by my friends at the Beat, who've been delightful, and they are just getting started.